Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today on today's episode of Peep into Education through the lens of educators, students, and families. My name is Kylie Elizabeth, and also known as the Virtual Educator. Today, I have a very fun special guest with me today. I have Cedric Scott Jr., who is a father, a husband, and an edupreneur, and he is here today just to kind of talk about what he is doing in the field of education in STEM or STEAM. And I'm going to just bring him right in, and we're going to have a conversation here on representation in education, as well as some supports and some resources for us here in science and mathematics. So I'm going to bring Cedric on. All right. How's it going?
Going great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you, having me on your platform and just gracious for all the work that you're doing. So definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on, Cedric. Again, so we have you on here. I was fortunate enough to see you on Instagram via EduHustle and learning some things about you and what you're doing here in the STEM world as far as science and mathematics, particularly mathematics. So I'll go ahead and just let you introduce yourself a little bit about what you're doing, and we'll dive right into your platforms and some resources that you're sharing with us.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate it. But yeah, I'm Cedric Scott Jr., and I am a few different things. But the three kind of main pillars I like to highlight and prop up are being a husband, a father, and an educator. And my journey into education was kind of interesting, and I didn't necessarily plan it out in the way that it kind of panned out. I originally started out as a chemist. I went to Virginia State University, so shout outs to the HBCUs out there, and got my bachelor's in chemistry. Began working in science and chemical industry, and then pivoted from that into education teaching, and then that worked, kind of worked my way up through the education system, I guess, the ranks, if you will. And my last school-based role was actually an assistant principal at an elementary school in Washington, D.C. Since then, I made another shift because I found out that my wife and I were expecting our first child, my son. And with that, I just wanted to really be home, be present for them, and just make sure that it was, everything was kind of tight knit and well kept at home, just because I know how important it is, especially as a Black man, raising a son, raising children in general, but definitely, looking at him as a young man and the importance of my presence there, and definitely support with him, as well as my wife, who's also an educator. And yeah, so I've been moving into more of the education technology space in the past several years, with a lot of the craziness that's happened with the wake of the pandemic and everything like that. And with that, began creating different resources and just different, opportunities and things like that that I believe were missing in different aspects of education that I saw as a student, but then also as an education professional. So that's what's led me to where I am now, and some of the things that I'm doing. But I'm sure we'll kind of get into those things as well on the platform here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Well, and I know we didn't really touch base on this, but I would like you just for a second, let's back to your HBCU. So state again which HBCU you were from. And I'm just curious, what I guess was the best experience that you had out of being a student at an HBCU?
For sure. And yeah, I went to Virginia State University. Shout outs to the Trojans. And the one thing that I can definitely point to in terms of that experience is actually the relationships and just all the support that I was able to gain, after the fact. I have a really close, tight knit group of good brothers whom I'm still in contact with, and we look out for each other. And I think those things are what really helped me get through during that time, being a first generation college student, and all those things. I think having a community that I can now even lean into as an adult man really, made all the difference in the world. But I think also, just in terms of the experience being there, being on campus, there were just certain aspects, I think, within, even going into different avenues within the buildings, and the university counseling center and folks there who were always supportive. And then of course my professors, and it was really just an interesting experience overall socially, but even I think more so within my education kind of grounding, within the chemistry department, which was actually a pretty small department. But again, it was like that tight knit community of everybody just trying to really push themselves, do better. And yeah, I just had an amazing experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I would always go back and do it again. And yeah, I'm definitely a proponent of HBCUs, and just there's just nothing like that experience, and it's really actually kind of difficult to explain in a weird
Yeah.
way. But
hmm
I just think about it, reflect on it. It just always brings a smile to my face. So definitely.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely have to elaborate that on another episode for HBCUs, because I'm always interested in hearing stories from that. Because myself, I did not attend an HBCU, so they always look like such a fun environment to be around, especially with our community of people, and just to have that extra level of support. So thank you for sharing that little bit there. All right, so let's kind of get into the meat of what you do. So you're a chemist, you have a background in STEM, mathematics, and science. So share just a little bit about your educational journey and kind of how you got to where you were in the teaching aspect before you got to principal.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I would have to kind of go back, way back. When I was a kid, growing up, my mom, before her, unfortunate passing, when I was just 10 years old, she actually instilled a really strong pride, as far as education goes, and just really wanted for myself and my siblings, to do the best that we could in school. And she had, I think, just some type of like innate feeling and understanding that education was the pathway, to greater opportunities and different things that we would see. And for me, that's the complete and utter truth. And I think even just within my experience being a public school student, reflecting on even just the teachers that I had, and I can always point to two in particular. Uh, in elementary school, my science teacher by the name of Mr. Preston was a great influence and impact on me. And then once I got to high school, my 10th grade chemistry teacher, Mr. Bynum, they both kind of, I think, in a way, really solidified where I was going pathway wise. And my mom, I joke often sometimes because she said, growing up, she wanted me to be a chemical engineer. And I was laugh and say, well, hopefully me becoming a chemist was enough, but with that in mind, thinking about the impact and influence of Mr. Preston and then Mr. Bynum, I knew that I loved science and was definitely just all into it, and it made sense, and it was just a passion. And growing up, going through elementary and middle school, they don't necessarily separate the sciences into they're kind of distinguished or different disciplines like chemistry, physics. But when I got to high school, I realized what type of science I was really interested in, and which happened to be chemistry. And I was like, at that point, 10th grade, I was like, that's what I'm going to study in college. And I also say that it's no coincidence that I actually ended up teaching, as well, just because of that influence, again, of those gentlemen, and then the the value of education that my mom instilled in me when I was a young boy. So going into teaching, it made sense, honestly. Even just being able to pivot from being a scientist into teaching, people are like, well, how does that even happen? And yeah, I mean, it worked out, and I just thought that ultimately going into teaching, I could create some of that same joy and, support and passion that I had, and was beneficial to me, and be able to do that. And interestingly enough, with Mr. Preston in particular, my first year of teaching was actually his last year. Then he retired after 31 years. So being able to then go back home to my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and sit down and have a conversation with him about that experience and what he kind of dealt with and went through, and what his trajectory was as I was going into mine, that was just kind of a full circle moment. So yeah, I think those influences, definitely helped me, and shaped, I think, in a way, the pathway that I saw myself going on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so obviously you had, for you, you had, as you mentioned, two male educators within the field that you were interested in. And primarily the reason that to the viewers, that I have brought Cedric on was because he does represent, Black or African-American males in education. And in just in general, with teaching, males in general only represent 25% of the teachers. And we're talking about public education, which both of us come from the world of. And then in men in general, again, that's just about a quarter of who's representing our teachers, our educators in the field. And just a deeper statistic, as of 2020 and 2021, only 1.3% of public school teachers identified as Black or African American. So for you, as a male, as a Black African American male, what do you feel, I know it's kind of going very deep level, what do you feel that represents in this field of work that we do, and why is it important for you to kind of show up in this field and in this work that we do here in education?
Well, I believe in the concept of mirrors and windows when it comes to education and learning. I definitely believe that for children in particular, especially really young ones, being able to see themselves as well as see the rest of the world is imperative. The issue, kind of what you highlighted with that statistic around Black men in schools, is that too often myself, as well as pretty much all of the African American young men, students in general that have actually had the privilege of teaching or working with, they only saw the window, right? There was not necessarily the mirror aspect, which to me can, I think, ultimately end up doing more harm than good, because without being able to see that representation, right, understand that these things are possible, you can excel, you can be whatever it is that you seek or that you believe, right, and knowing that certain things are possible, then what does that do to the psyche of children? And thinking about it from my own kind of aspect and perspective, even becoming a chemist, it was an interesting thing whenever I would even have conversations with, my counterparts or whoever, like people in my neighborhood that I grew up with, because it was always like, wow, I never met a Black chemist before. And I was like, well, me either, until I became one. Right? So with all that said, it's like those things are not helping, right? I think that, the whole taboo aspect of the first Black whatever, as it pertains to a lot of this, is not, serving anyone. And there's actually been, studies done that say that having a Black male teacher actually helps all students, not necessarily just young Black males or young Black females for that matter. It helps everybody, because again, me showing up, you know, tattooed and things like that, what I mean? It creates a different type of viewpoint and perspective of who we are. And
Right.
I firmly believe in my favorite African proverb is the tale of the hunt. And
Mm.
with that, it's basically just to summarize is, um, the tale of the hunt will always favor the hunter, because you never hear the side of the story from the lions. And I essentially would be that lion standing up and saying, well, that's not the whole truth, right? Let me tell
Right.
you the reality of it. And whenever we're able to do that and have more of us stand up, then we can get rid of some of those things, like, the stereotypes and the feelings around us being a monolith and things like that. But we have to show improve. And with 1.3%, it's difficult to be able to distinguish that.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And again, the different points of view, I think I identify myself as, a Black educator myself, is just why in 2023 are we saying, we're one of the first, right? And I think that's something that really boggles my mind when it comes to the world that we're in, especially if we're in public education. It's not as much prevalent in homeschooling or in private education when we're able to kind of do our own thing. But for me, public education is super important because most of our families have to rely on public education, either due to work schedules or due to just the capacity of not being able to homeschool themselves or not even having the education to do it themselves, right? And so it's very important to have representation of our people within education. I think, what grade was I? I was about fifth or sixth grade, no, sixth grade, middle school, when I had my first Black male educator, and Mr. Grimes, that was his name, and he was so awesome. He actually taught us history. He was our social studies teacher. It was very, very important. And just as for me as a biracial student and somebody who was trying to learn and understand both sides of my heritage and kind of where I come from, to learn from a Black male educator was highly effective in my education and kind of helping me understand my own identity because I was able to relate to somebody in that field. So I'm so happy that you're in this world with us and able to share that as well for your son, who has a very great role model to kind of look up to in that aspect and in that world. So I do want to touch on, as we move forward, kind of touch into what it is that you like to talk about on your platforms. And so again, Edu Hustle is where I seen you on first, and you were talking about your melanated mathematics. So tell me a little bit more about that and what that entails.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, basically where I kind of position myself, and I tried to capsize this into just two words, but it's educational empowerment. And for me, looking at it from that lens, I thought about, well, what does that mean, and who are kind of the key players in the need for empowerment, or empowering rather. And of course, you think about our youth, our families, things like that, our community. But even in the scope of that, I also looked at and was like, well, what about educators, right? What about the people who are, kind of boots on the ground doing the work? And my approach has essentially been one of support, in more of a holistic, I think, type of feel. And with that, initially I created Melanated Mathematics, which is math and financial literacy content in the context of Black history and culture. And with that, I actually started and basically got, I would say, like proof of concept of that content as I began creating it, not really knowing like what it was going to essentially become. But back in 2020, when you know, COVID hit and everybody was home, I wanted to figure out, new ways and means, even without having to be, in person, to support families, parents from home, things like that. And I came across different co-ops through Facebook. And with that, I began actually teaching some courses, or classes rather, I would say, in the co-ops, and sharing resources and advice and whatever I could from the lens of an educator, at the time a new father, to the families within these groups. And with that, I started creating the content and teaching it as part of, some of the classes I was doing. And with that, the families, a lot of the mothers, I've definitely got to shout out Black women for sure. Definitely kind of took hold of what I was doing and said, we really like this. This is great, and offered me feedback, which I graciously took, and was able to adapt it and then produce, some of the work that I've been able to do, like the different workbooks, and even in collaboration with some others, as I think I mentioned before, when we jumped on, was talking about even some of the artwork, like the representation. Right now, the shirt that I'm wearing is one of the Melanated Mathematics characters that was actually produced by a gentleman that I went to school with, in, I believe, elementary, middle school, who was actually a professional artist now. So I was able to reach out to him as another Black man, as an artist, and say, hey, I'm producing this content. I think it'll be great to have this type of representation, and he was awesome. I'm able to do that. So shout out to Raymond Youngblood at Ray's Arts, and from there I was able to kind of just continue to build and compound. I think more so in the areas where I saw that there was a disparity. If you work in schools, or if you've been in schools at all, then you probably realize that Black history outside of February is not necessarily addressed or taught. And even within February, typically it's a kind of a watered down version.
Right.
So I thought, why not go deeper into that and make sure that within this content, it's there, right? It's representative. So one of the, I think, kind of key points contrary to why uh,
Hmm.
the focal point is not necessarily there as far as the history is that, oh, it doesn't appear in core curriculum, which is, your math, your reading, so on.
Yeah.
So I said, well, why not put it into it, right? Why not create a multiplication word problem that is based around the multiplying cells of
Yeah.
Henrietta Lacks, right? Why not?
Hmm.
Why not infuse that all together? So I
Right.
was able to do that. But then the other aspect of it, being financial literacy, is something that I was learning myself. As an adult, male, and father, husband, all these things, and even creating business types of opportunities. um,
Hmm.
I said, well, as I learn this information, I should also infuse this here and make sure that we're basically getting the information and giving it directly back to anyone who would need it, which, starting with youth as young as 5 years old. And I started writing and creating the financial literacy content, which turned into 3 separate workbooks for children from ages 5 all the way up to roughly 13 is what I've taught.
Okay.
So, excuse me. And within that, just building not necessarily something that would just only serve our youngest learners or our children, but that
Hmm.
parents could actually tap into as well,
Okay.
because along with that material, within the financial literacy workbooks, because those are all digital at this point, you can actually click within that actual file and get access to an AI chatbot where you can ask questions about financial concepts and it will respond. But then the second thing that you mentioned as well is, which with Edu Hustle, is primarily focusing on supporting educators in their career journey. And the mission for Edu Hustle is to guide educators to maximizing their time, talent, and earning potential, which are really the 3 pillars that I focused on as I pivoted out of working in a school setting, and being able
Hmm.
to be home, be present again, and but make sure we're still maintaining the same standard of living as far as my
Right.
family goes. So, but yeah,
Right.
those are kind of where I am with everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, awesome. So thank you. Okay, so you did kind of clarify, that was my question of the age range for your resources that you have. So you said 5 years old to 13. So 13 is about eighth, ninth grade, right? Eighth grade, ninth grade level. Okay, so and then is that focusing on science and mathematics or just math?
So
Remind.
the workbook series, the original kind of workbook series that I created, is actually kind of carved out for elementary, so roughly
Okay.
grades K through 5. But the
Okay.
financial literacy content is where there's a little bit more of a distinguishing factor regarding age. And I also
Hmm.
say that even though the content itself is written mathematically at those age levels, the content in terms of the financial verbiage and things like that, the vocabulary is honestly good for anybody, even
Okay.
adults, because
Yep.
I mean, credit is the same whether you're 5 or
Yes.
55. And
Yes.
there's also associated material that goes along with that, like financial flashcards and things like that, that
Okay.
can support that learning too. So yeah, I would say that that side of it for sure is definitely good for the whole family. But the holistic approach of including and infusing Black history into
Yes.
all of the tasks, I think, is good for everybody.
Okay, awesome. So families, you hear that from families that are listening in. If you need some guidance on financial literacy for yourself and for your kids, definitely be sure to tap into Cedric's Melanated Mathematics so you can be sure to look at some of that financial literacy piece together. I think that's really important, especially in 2023. So I've shared with you, I host myself some events around Arizona where we do support Black-owned businesses and really definitely highlights a lot of financial literacy aspects. And for me and for myself, that I've really worked on with our kids is I think our young kids, and I have an 8-year-old and 11-year-old that really kind of have a hard time of understanding financials and understanding money and understanding, it takes a lot to kind of get the things that we have. And so any of these financial literacy pieces are super important for us to utilize with our children as young as we can do it. And so, like you said, you have kindergarten 5-year-olds. It's really important. Um, Something that I've kind of noticed for us here, especially in the US, is that and I don't know, Cedric, if you've kind of felt that when you were teaching, is that we have a very low bar of understanding sometimes in our systems, where people either one, don't understand the resources that they have, or two, if we have children, that we are not really showing them what the world really is, right? We're kind of sheltering them at a very early age. We live in a very rough society, and I think nothing is really different for us right now in 2023, except for the technology. Right now, everything's kind of very visible in our face. Like, we see the injustices, we see why kids are being treated differently, and we see all of these things. And so, as parents, it's very important for us to really show these our children and our students at a very young age what it means to be financially free, what it means to be understanding of how finances work, how credit works, and things like that. And so I really appreciate that you have created this resource for our families and for our children at a young age. So again, where can they find this information so they can go on and look up that those resources that you have?
Yeah, really simple for Melanated Mathematics. You can go to melanatedmath.com and
Okay.
access everything there, as well as there's actually a section for a bunch of free resources that you can just
Mm-hmm.
click to download, which I'm actually proud. I haven't checked just yet, but my goal for those resources was actually to reach 1,000 free downloads. Last I
Okay.
checked, I think I was like a little over 990. So probably
Nice.
less than 10 downloads. So if you're watching this,
Okay.
go ahead and click, and let's get to that 1,000. So we can have a celebration,
Absolutely.
probably do some discounts and that type of thing. But it's been awesome being able to provide even just that, and access to different resources and supports just at the base.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I was one of those people. I did download one of mine for. So again, I have a third grader and a fifth grader, and again, it's so important. And I don't, you have a little. So yours is four or five
He'll be
right now.
4 in March.
Four, right? So he's still tiny, So like right now, my 8-year-old is like, can we buy this? Can we buy this? And I laughed at myself because in a previous video I was like, I'm the mean mom because I don't give allowances for general cleaning. You're supposed to clean your room, you're supposed to help with dishes, you're supposed to take out so it's more of like intentional things, like what are you doing that I don't have to ask for you to do, and then kind of raise some money that way. Or my daughter likes to make jewelry, so I bought her a whole set of about $300 worth of material to make some clay earrings and jewelry, and I said, oh, you owe me this money back. So we kind of have like a running ledger of this, and we kind of run down like, how much does this product cost, how much does the materials cost, and then what are you going to sell it for, how are you going to make an income and make money. And so our kids, I've talked about this in a previous conversation that I had on a different platform about instant gratification, right? Our kids so much just want, because they're so used to having things at their fingertips, especially when it comes to technology. But it's important to remind even us as adults and our teenagers and our younger students that things do not come super easy, and everything has a price to it, regardless if it's, for me, I'm a coffee person. So if it's my cup of coffee, if it's my food that I want to eat, to teach our kids, like, hey, let's take them grocery shopping and have them buy, the products that they're wanting so much. So it's highly important to teach this concept to our students and our children. And it's again, thank you so much for having these resources. So families, please be sure that you're checking out Cedric's Melanated Math online, and definitely take a look at those financial literacy pieces as well. So kind of segueing into that topic, it's related and it's relative. So you have your shirt, you have the gear, you have the title, Melanated Mathematics, right? And I only bring this up because again, it's a hot topic. And so we hear about some books across the United States that are considered banned, or banned books, or banned curriculum, and things like that. And I'm not sure how that works around your area in DC, but have you experienced any any kind of pushback about the materials that you're pushing out in relation to banned books? And I know this was kind of an extra topic that we didn't
Yeah, I mean,
mention.
well, not necessarily pushback per se. I've gotten
Hmm.
more so just questions
Okay.
around the maybe not the well, I guess I can say maybe like the intent of it.
Okay.
A popular question is always, well, is it only for Black students?
Sure.
And for me, no, right?
Right.
Because if this is being positioned telling the story of Black history is also indeed American history. So
Right.
it would definitely make sense for anybody within this country
Hmm.
to dive into it, because otherwise, where else are you going to learn it? And then just related to, even again going back into the mathematics of it, uh, I'm a math educator, right? I've specialized in it, and so with that, I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't, make sense to lean into these resources as well, just because you're actually going to get quality math content. The context of
Right.
it is Black history, but at the end of it, regardless of anything, I mean, the problems themselves that were created um, are for the benefit of building out, math competency in any person who, I think, engages with it. And then, of course,
Right.
with the aspect of the financial literacy piece, I I don't necessarily see a lot of resources that I think really hit on those concepts and break those things down in the way that I've been able to do so with the material that I've produced. So again, yes, you're going to get the Black history context, which
Hmm.
overall is going to benefit everybody. It's
Right.
history, right? But within
Absolutely.
that, going even deeper, looking at the financial component woven into the mathematics and how it appears in the actual application. One example is for the managing money financial literacy workbook. I actually had a family go through the material itself. One of the first problems talks about shopping at a Black-owned grocery store called West Philly
Okay.
Produce. And this family, after completing that activity and the task based on that prompt, went to West Philly Produce and actually visited the store and shopped there.
Right.
So again, making those real connections, I think for
Yes.
anybody is going to be beneficial. So yeah, when I get the
Absolutely.
question of, is this only for Black children or Black families? No, it's for anybody who is open,
Right.
to receiving the information and actually wants, dare I say, quality mathematics content.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I thank you. Yes, I love that. And I can't wait to kind of dive in a little bit more into those prompts and some of the resources that I've looked at myself. So I appreciate that you apply that real world concepts to your mathematical equations and your problems, because again, I think that is a big thing that is missing in our curriculum in general is, and this is across any board, it's that real life application. And me and you both come from the curriculum and instruction background, and how long it takes for curriculum to kind of be revamped and to be updated. It kind of takes many years, even between volumes of the same math textbook. It will take 8 to 10 years for it to be updated, and by the time 2 3 years in, students that are receiving this information or even the graphics within the book, it's not very relevant to them in the time frame that we're in. So to be able to have resources that is very, one, applicable to the current times that we're in, but two, also to the culture and to the spaces and the environment that we're living in is extremely important. So I'm just going to give you all the props for that. So thank you so much for creating that content. It's super important for our community and for any of the communities, right, that want to use it and want to learn. As somebody, so for myself, I helped manage a Black-owned bookstore, and that was kind of a similar concept of, oh, is this space, only for the Black community? And it's like, no, these spaces are for everybody, just like we want all spaces open for everybody, and it's just about learning of the culture and of the concepts that are within our community for us to be able to engage, right? Engage our children, engage the people of the community, engage our just in community in general of what we have to share, and then to use that as an educational platform to then teach certain concepts to either our children or to our community. So great. Okay, so make sure you guys go look that up, Melanated Mathematics. We want to definitely support Cedric in reaching his 1,000 subscriptions or downloads, excuse me, of those curriculums. So definitely be sure to check that out. Okay, so the next thing I kind of want to segue into is, so we talk about STEM or STEAM curriculum within education. So for those of you that aren't familiar with those acronyms, so STEM is science, technology, and then we have education and mathematics, and then we also are engineering, excuse me, engineering and mathematics, and then we have STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So Cedric, kind of within the STEAM or the STEM world, as a teacher, what concepts were you involved in that space?
Well, all of it, honestly, including the A for the arts. My master's, which is in education and curriculum and instruction, is actually a specialization in STEAM. So I just think that, again, like a lot of people have argued and said, well, you can't leave out the arts. I agree with that for sure, because you can easily make a case for the appearance. I mean, look at my shirt, right? It's a character from a mathematics resource with like an atom on his shirt, so science there, right? A calculator, it's technology, but it was produced by an artist. So that's a very simple way to look at it. But another way to even consider is in the approaches that we're using. And as you mentioned just before, talking about the real world application, one thing that I can reflect on and remember really vividly in my second year teaching my third grade classroom was our unit on area and perimeter. And some of the interesting parts of it were that not only did we go through the basics of understanding area and perimeter, the equations for it, so on and so forth. I'm of the belief, and I came up with an equation myself for education that is basically stating that exposure plus experience equals education, right? The exposure piece is basically being shown something or making having awareness around something existing. The experience of it is actually you being engulfed in that thing and having it surround you and you interacting with it, which ultimately will lead to you being educated in it. So with that in mind, thinking about that particular unit, I didn't just go through teaching kind of the basics from the book in terms of what area and perimeter are. We went, of course, into thinking about things like architectural design, which appears in a lot of curricula. However, I thought, well, how can I expand upon this? At the time, interestingly enough, the school was installing solar panels. So I pulled in
Okay.
one of the engineers off the roof and was like, hey, man, can you come talk to my class real quick about what you're doing?
Yeah.
So loop that in. And then we also at that time, while I was still in DC, I've actually since relocated now in the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina area. But
Okay.
out there, I looped in some of those contexts and contextual points related to my students who grew up in DC, knew about Howard University, and started doing some research myself and learning some different things. I was able to loop that in. So thinking about I believe it was the first Black-owned architectural firm called McKissick and McKissick at that time, was actually run, I believe, by two sisters, and I think they're actually twins. One of them named Daryl McKissick. So I taught my students about that firm, the work that they've done, showed a picture of Mrs. McKissick on the screen. It might be Dr. McKissick. I want to be respectful of her, but she was a graduate of Howard University and worked there and was on like their board. So sharing those things in conjunction with what the students were learning, and then on top of that, we actually had a partnership with the Kennedy Center of the Arts in DC, where we had
Okay.
an actual teaching artist come into the classroom and work with me directly in that unit. So we went from creating, architectural drawings on grid paper to then my students producing three-dimensional, buildings, right? We talked about community,
Mhm.
what things are needed in a community, what types of buildings are going to help us. We need stores, we need this, we need that. So the students were basically able to map out, with their architectural drawings, and then work with this teaching artist, to produce the buildings that they wanted. And it was
Mhm.
interesting even to see some of them putting aluminum foil on the roofs of their buildings. And I was like, well, what are you doing? And they were like, well, the engineer came in and told us about the benefits of solar. So I'm putting solar electricity in my building. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And basically
Yeah.
we created like a whole little town and community just based in that solid, kind of foundation of, this is what area and perimeter is. But again, making it real, making it tangible, and making it
Yeah.
relatable to their lives and why they should actually
Right.
even care about it. But yeah, so to your point, that's kind of where my brain went with that one.
Absolutely. And yeah, the making it relevant. So when I taught high school, and we always see this on social media, we see this, we probably even said this ourselves as adults, me and you are a similar age. And why did we learn this in high school? Like, we never use X, Y, and Z to this day. And to really take education kind of by the horns, to lack of better words, is to really to be able to apply, what is very visible to these kids, like right in their face, what it is. And so you took that concept of, hey, we're using solar panels right here in this school, and this is how we apply it, area and perimeter to the mathematical equation, right, as well as the science component, right? They're learning how the sun affects, the energy, and to be able to give energy into the building. So that's a great key concept of being able to use STEM in education, and to be able to utilize that world. And thank you for promoting your shirt and highlighting that area too, because again, the arts is very important. As a person who has a music background, art is very relevant, especially if you're doing audio engineering. That's very much scientific and mathematical concepts as well. So kind of all of those things. So thank you so much for sharing that much, that feedback on there. The other thing that I kind of was interested in as I was looking at your EduHustle websites is you started talking about AI in education. And I kind of want to hear your kind of point of view on it, and what you think about the current trend of AI in education, and kind of either how you utilize it, and maybe later kind of what's like a concern that you have potentially with using AI.
Yeah. Well, this is one of my favorite topics to go into at this point. So yeah, I've been delving into the world of more so like the generative artificial intelligence, which most people are familiar with things like Chat GPT, for example, where you go into a chatbot, you type something in, which is called your prompt, and from there it will generate whatever it is that you're asking it, or kind of giving it a command, I guess, to produce. And this, a lot of people use these things for generating resources, product description, stuff like that. I've definitely used it in those contexts in terms of making writing processes more efficient and effective. Even keeping kind of the same voice, same tone, if you will, throughout your
Okay.
writing. But then I think even building from that, I started thinking about, well, who, again, it's always about educational empowerment, supporting, giving the resources where they may not be reaching. So
Mhm.
one of the things I thought of was, well, who could benefit from this, most? And again, went back into my education community. And some of the first things I started creating myself is, after realizing that you can actually set up your own chatbots, started actually creating my own chatbots and setting them up on different platforms. Again, aimed at the folks that I felt needed the support. So the first bot that I set up was actually the Edu Hustle bot. I call it Eddie for
Okay.
short, EDDY.
Okay.
And that bot is basically a digital kind of career coach for educators. So for educators who are looking for different opportunities or different pathways in their career, maybe they want to do something aside from teaching, or make another kind of frame, even do something in the edupreneur space, right? Business
Okay.
wise for themselves, they can go in and talk to this bot, and it will respond to them in real time. And then One of the other ones that I kind of lean into a little bit before with some of the free resources that I talked about under Melanated
Hmm.
Mathematics. I actually did kind of mirror that same idea with setting up a bot that's actually specifically for homeschool families. And
Okay.
basically, homeschool parents can go into this chatbot and have conversation with it, ask about, learning resources, even, can you produce a plan for 4 weeks of my child who's interested in this at this age? And it will map those things out and provide the learning supports, even links to
Awesome.
other resources. So within that, I have just continually been learning myself and applying things even within my workspace, sharing how these things can make processes, life in general, I think, kind of more efficient in areas where we might spend a lot of time with, again, producing a lot of different writing materials. And yeah, I use it for generating ideas and concepts, and kind of building out things, and even thinking about business aspect kind of wise, thinking about things like, if I'm trying to learn more so about creating a certain type of document or something like that,
Hmm.
you know it's an easy kind of go to learn more about, but then also even be able to have it produce a template or
Okay.
something along those lines. So yeah, those are just a few ways, but I mean, I'm digging into AI from a lot of different perspectives, and it's something
Yes.
that I'm just really kind of engulfed in, and
Yes.
I don't really see it going anywhere. And I know
Mm.
that there's some nervousness, and folks are kind of worried, but I always kind of
Yes.
lean on the importance of telling both sides of the story, making sure
Hmm.
that the benefit of it and how it can help
Right.
and all these things, but then also really being honest about it and saying like, well,
Hmm.
these are the things that are and could potentially go wrong, which,
Right.
and I can, I know we're going there probably next, but I just kind of try to make it as simple as possible in terms of understanding.
Hmm.
So we've been using artificial intelligence,
Yes.
honestly, for a while now. If
Yes.
you don't know, just think about your ATM machine and
Yes.
your self checkout at the
Yes.
grocery store, the drugstore, things like that. So those are kind of minor instances, but what we're
Right.
looking at now is a growing and expansive situation that, honestly, I think that everybody should at least gain some knowledge and insight and kind of be on the train,
Hmm.
because I do think that there's a great potential for a lot of people to be left behind whenever it comes to a lot of the advancement and the potential of what could be using a lot of the technology.
Right. And that makes sense. Definitely. It definitely makes sense because I don't know what the show is called, but it's about Sheldon, the little boy from
Mhm.
The Big Bang Theory. So, and it was funny. I was just watching the episode where he just got his first computer, in the 80s. And I think back to when we got our first computers, we had, especially in school, because me and you are the same age. So, like, especially in school, we had the apples with like either the purple or the blue, the neon blue or purple colored laptops, and the circle key mouses. No wonder why we all have carpal tunnel and really 33. But just kind of thinking about the technology that we had even when the internet first was coming out. And this is all in a sense a form of AI, and of course as technology advances, it's just going to just be more advanced in the concept of how we use it and how responsive it is, and how accurate of information that it does give us. And what I do appreciate about it, I believe, is just the quickness of some of the information that we can get. And some of the things that I do caution about, just kind of on my side, and it's something that I'll elaborate on another episode, is just when we're using the AI technologies, especially such as Chat GPT, is just being able to kind of tweak it into a sense of like, yes, we have the information. Now, are we confirming that the information is correct? Are we adjusting it to be our tone of voice? Are we, if we're utilizing it for certain things? And so there is a way to use it, but it's also an appropriate way to embed it in the work that we're doing, especially for educators, and not to just rely on that for a sense of ease. But even as parents, if we're utilizing ChatGPT or any of those AI resources, and for ourselves or for our children, are we looking at it as, okay, it is giving us a sense of information, but is the information correct? Because we can't say that 100% everything that we're seeing off the internet is correct, but of course, we have the resources available online, so assuming most of them is correct, it's kind of like a gray line to get into. So I definitely appreciate that you have that resource embedded into your Melanated Mathematics, especially for those homeschool parents. So any of my homeschoolers that are on board listening, be sure again to check that out, because that's going to be a very good resource for you guys to use with your students, especially. And it's okay, and we talk about this in other episodes, is if we're all not strong in every area, especially as a homeschooler. And I know math was not my strong suit, and neither was chemistry. So I'm kind of jealous of your skill sets here a little bit. But just to now be in 2023 and have these resources that are available, and I'm kind of a no holds bar when it means we don't have an excuse anymore to not be able to support our children, because we have all of these additional supports here. And so I kind of bring that up to say, like, yes, we have, AI, we have all of these online resources, but again, one, you need to do your research, you need to do your due diligence when you're utilizing these platforms, but then also just to know that, hey, yeah, you might not know something, but you also don't have as much as an excuse not to do something because we do have these supports here. So I love that you include that there. All right. So I think one of the last kind of little things, and it's kind of a little bit of a segue, but one of your episodes, you talked about your brain breaks and having your coloring breaks with your worksheets. Is this part of the curriculum that you offer, or was this kind of something else that you were, just kind of touching base on your platform?
Well, yeah, the brain breaks thing is more so just I think a recommendation and kind of a tip, honestly, when it comes to education, learning, as we kind of look at, especially some of our younger learners, and the fact that we might put them in a position where they become exhausted with learning and work, that it definitely is beneficial to not only children but adults as well, to stop for a moment and just like give yourself a time period away from whatever it is that you're working on, especially if you get to a point of kind of being either overwhelmed, or you get to a point feeling of like you're running into a wall. It will definitely serve you to take a step away. And one of the ways that I found that actually work really well in being able to kind of reset us and bring us some joy and give us a little bit more energy is actually coloring. And I came across this, actually, the idea of it initially with my son, and we would sit and we would color, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. So from that, within the Melanated Mathematics content, there actually are coloring resources there, so you can use them for that point. But another resource that I created, kind of aside from that, is actually a stress relief coloring book, like a digital coloring book, that's more so prefaced for adults, to give us that time spent away from, because I work from home, I work remotely. So if I'm in my home office and I've been staring at my two screens for too long, I'm like, all right, I need to take a break, reset, go get some water or something like that. And, at certain points, which you might have seen in that video, like I will pull out some of my coloring sheets from that particular coloring book, and I'll take a break and I'll color, and then I'll go back to doing my work. And it's overall just kind of a beneficial, just kind of breathing point to just take a step back and say, all right, this is going to be here, and I'll come back to it. But for right now, I need to actually make sure that I'm good. And coloring is a good reset, for a lot of people. And I encourage things like that. Again, going back into even the STEAM and the artistic aspect of it. Why not? Right? It's something that feels
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, it's something that feels good and it's very important. And so, for my listeners that aren't sure what a brain break is, a brain break technically, is just anything that's just kind of giving us as adults, as any level of students that are in the learning environment, just taking a break from the day-to-day learning. And what are you doing to provide kind of a mind shift, right, for them to kind of get their mind off the task at hand, but use more something that's a creative or kinesthetic body movement, and use some like social emotional learning tactics, right? And in general, this really helps with self-management, self-awareness. A lot of relationship building skills can be implemented in there, either social awareness as well as response to decision making. And there's a lot of articles that kind of back up the importance of allowing brain breaks for our students, especially like for somebody like my son who's autistic, who really needs kind of a sensory break to be able to relinquish his mind from that logical thinking, but go more into the creative, which kind of enhances that logical thinking. So implementing that, intentionally into your concepts and your work is, again, it's those little things that a lot of us don't really think of, and I love that you've included all of those minor pieces into the curriculum that you have developed in your Melanated Mathematics. So thank you again for doing it. I'm just like, now as I keep talking about it, I'm like, okay, I really have to look at all of this stuff here. Okay, so I think I have kind of hit on all of the topics that I wanted to talk about with you today. And again, to the followers that are here today, Cedric has mentioned when we were talking about, just the concepts of STEM and STEAM, another, and I'm sure you've read it, but the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, right? So this was a book that I read when I was in college working on my master's, that really helped me understand a lot about science and a lot about technology, as well as, in the STEM area itself. So for those that are listening, if you want a good read, that's a very great book for you to read by Rebecca Skloot is her name, that wrote that book, but really just kind of gives you a very historical context of looking at our DNA and cancer and all of those things in relation to the African American community. So that's thank you for bringing that up earlier in our discussion. So my last question before we go today is, and this is what I'm asking everybody, is what do you feel, as a father, your son's about to enter into 4K or kindergarten, or, just as an educator, somebody that's came from the teaching and the principal world, what do you feel is an area or a couple areas that our education system needs to improve on, in order to improve the education for our students here in the US?
I think the primary one that I would lean into is kind of, I think, a big idea, but the idea around standardization,
Mm-hmm.
relates to testing and things like that. But I think essentially what's happening within the education system is that the attempt is to standardize people and entities and things that aren't really standard. And I say that to say, like, every child, every person is different. So
Mm-hmm.
to kind of assume the intent to streamline everybody's experience as kind of the same
Mm-hmm.
thing and have the same expectation, the same format, is to me, it honestly doesn't really make any sense.
Right.
And really thinking about the fact that teachers are expected to differentiate their approaches, their strategies, the tools, but the measures that we're using are going to be all the exact same for every student is
Mm-hmm.
it. I don't know if it, really, like, negates the purpose
Right.
in all the work that's being done. But I think,
Right.
thinking about it from that lens and perspective, I just think that can be, attacked a little bit differently, where, the idea around, standardized testing and things like that, where it's the bar is the same across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really kind of combats things when we start talking about equity, right? For example,
Right.
where, we know equality is everybody gets the same, but equity is everybody gets what they need. So
Right.
if we're doing that on the front end, as far as teaching goes, and you have, instructors and educators within the classrooms, administrators who are doing their part and, pushing really hard to provide different experiences and, different approaches and things that actually are going to work in support of that community, those students, the families. But at the end
Hmm.
of the day, they all have to take the same test, or they're all being measured at the same bar. Um, it, I just think that offsets things, and I think it's disheartening. So, keeping that in mind, and then just even like the attachment to those types of metrics, and how it then relates to what the expectation or belief, or potential trajectory of students, is. Because I mean, be honest, as adults, like, a lot of us are not good test takers and things like that, but that doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean that we're not intelligent or we're not educated or we don't understand. It's
Right.
simply we can't reproduce it in the way that, we're being told that we have to. So I just say all that to say, you know, it's just not standard.
Yeah.
We're not standard. We're not one size fits
Yeah.
all cookie cutter type of, beings. We're
Yes.
just not, right? Where I'm different from you, who's different from the next person. Even if you have a twin, you're
Right.
different people.
You're
Uh,
going to be different. Right.
exactly. So I think the
Yes.
a lot of the approaches where those things are, just replicate over and over and over again, that, assembly line type of thing is
Hmm.
doing a disservice ultimately. And I think that whenever we see schools or districts, or, any other type of learning environment that kind of goes in another direction, we actually see
Yes.
that those things are working, very effectively. Even if we look at other countries and the way that they implement
Hmm.
their education systems, there can be
Absolutely.
something learned from that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that would be the one thing I would kind of lean into.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for those final thoughts. And I absolutely agree. As you know, again, somebody that's been in that world, and at a state level that's in that world, that standardized testing is really rough when we know that everybody is different and everybody is an individual and everybody learns different, thinks of the world differently. So to have standardized testing, it is kind of difficult, and that is something that I touched base on a little bit in one of my posts on my social media accounts, was talking about the effects of standardized testing on students and learning, right? And just in general, as of the 2023 NAEP standardized assessment data that came out, we're talking about only 35% of fourth graders are considered proficient in math, reading, and science. And then you have 46% of eighth graders, and then you have only 27.6% of 12th graders that are considered proficient in math, reading, and science. And, I asked these series of questions like, does standardized testing really demonstrate the learning of a student? Or, I noticed my son, especially when I was administering tests to these students, that these kids just press buttons, especially if they're on computer-based. They're just pressing, they're not even reading, they're not even trying. But then when it's paper-based, they're just exhausted from the year. And all of those things. And then you go into those discussions, even from schools. Are we teaching the students and closing educational gaps, or are we teaching to the test to demonstrate on a national or a state level or a district level that the students are proficient, right, in those specific areas, and kind of what that looks like? So I would love to continue a conversation around standardized testing, and would love your feedback and input on that as well. I see you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say anything else there?
Oh no, I think I'm good. I mean,
Okay.
that's just an exhaustive point for me for sure. And yeah, I think we could talk.
Yes,
We could talk for days
we
about
could.
that. But
We
yeah,
could.
it's something that needs
And
to
it,
be addressed.
it does. And, and to whatever, because there has to be some type of assessment, a tool, right, to know what it is that we're doing in education is actually effective, and it's understandable, right? But to apply that to the full general concept of the learning of the student, that is what doesn't make sense to me, especially when we're utilizing testing as a reward system. And again, we'll see, now we're gonna, let me stop myself on this one, because we'll kind of go into that deeply. So to the viewers, please stay tuned to that conversation. If you have anything else to add on to that, please feel free to post that in the chat. Cedric, thank you so much for sharing all that you're doing in the world of science and mathematics and STEM and your melanated mathematics. Again, for the last time, can you please tell me your social media handles and your website where we can find your resources?
Yes, so for the Melanated Mathematics resources, you can go to melanatedmath.com or melanatedmathematics.com. Melanated Math is shorter, of course. And then as far as socials, I actually just recently changed over my Instagram handle. It's basically my name. So at c.scott.jr. On Instagram.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm available everywhere else too. Use my actual name on LinkedIn. So if you're connected on LinkedIn, reach out to me there as well. But yeah, happy to help and support in any way that I can.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cedric. I appreciate you joining me today. And again, my name is Kylie Elizabeth. I also go by the Virtuoso Educator. This is our series today on Peep into Education through the lens of educators, students, and families. And again, thank you so much, Mr. Cedric Scott, for joining us. And please be sure to comment, like, subscribe, all the above. Follow me on social media. Follow Cedric on social media so you guys can support him. And thank you guys so much. You guys have a great day.